The man I died for was the one who slit my throat with a kiss. Now I'm reborn, not as his bride, but as his sovereign. And this time, he'll kneel before me, or perish." The grand cathedral echoed with wedding bells, petals falling like snow. The golden-haired prince, Adrian Vale, smiled lovingly at his bride-to-be, Celine Morwin, the orphan noble he lifted from ruin. But beneath the veil, Celine's hands trembled. Not from joy, from the weight of secrets. "You look at me like I'm your world, but you sold mine for a crown." As the priest began the vows, a cold glint shone beneath Adrian's sleeve, a hidden dagger. He leaned in, lips brushing hers. "You were never meant to rule beside me, Celine. Only to serve your purpose." The kiss turned to a gasp. Steel slid between her ribs. Blood bloomed like a crimson rose on her gown. Her last sight, Adrian's smug smile and his new queen stepping from the shadows. Leora, Celine's cousin. And best friend. Darkness. Cold. Silence. Then, a gasp. Celine shot upright in a bed of silk, her hands untouched by scars. A mirror revealed her face, younger, fiercer. The date? 5 years before her wedding. Before the betrayal. "I died. But now I live again?" Visions flickered. Adrian's betrayal, Leora's laughter, her own helplessness. Not this time. She wouldn't be a pawn. She'd be the player. The queen. "Play your games, Adrian. But this time, I write the rules." Celine returned to her family's ruined estate, once the laughingstock of nobility. But now, with knowledge from her past life, she moved swiftly. She whispered into the right ears. Invested in rising powers. Made unlikely alliances. Learned the art of war and seduction. Then, she set her sights on Crown Prince Adrian Vale, charming, manipulative, and destined to become king. But in this life, Celine would be queen, not by marriage. By conquest. At the royal banquet, Adrian's gaze locked onto her. He didn't recognize her soul, but he couldn't look away. "Lady Celine, you've grown beautifully. You always had potential." Celine tilted her head, smiling with fire behind her eyes. "Funny. I was thinking the same. About your fall." He laughed, charmed. But behind her fan, she clenched a vial of poison. The first move had been made. The game had begun. Days passed after the banquet. Celine kept a low profile, making discreet moves in the shadows while Adrian basked in the glory of his position. He thought her a simple noblewoman. What a mistake. He would soon see the monster he had created with his own hands. But he didn't realize his error. "Not yet. I know something is different about her, Leora. She's not the same girl who I fooled so easily." Leora, now Adrian's closest confidant and the second in command, raised an eyebrow. Her jealousy burned as she watched the budding attention Celine seemed to gather. It's only a matter of time before she falls back into line. "You're the crown prince, Adrian. You have the power to break her if you want." But Adrian's frown deepened as he looked over to where Celine stood, conversing with some of the kingdom's influential figures. His mind, once certain of his dominance, was now beginning to doubt. While Adrian squandered his attention on Leora, Celine wasn't wasting her time. She'd forged alliances with powerful merchants, cunning advisors, and even one of the kingdom's greatest generals, General Valen, an old ally from her past life. He had sworn his loyalty to her after the betrayal, and now he was at her side again. In a secluded meeting room, Celine, dressed in a deep red gown, sat at a long table surrounded by maps and parchments. Her voice was low, but commanding. Adrian believes that by charming the court and the nobles, he can rule. But power isn't in their hands. It's in the streets, the army, and the people's hearts. General Valen nodded. "You want to move before he does, Your Majesty. The longer we wait, the more dangerous his moves become. We must act soon, or he'll have the throne before we even realize it." Celine smiled, her eyes glowing with a fire that had been ignited by her betrayal and death. "Then it's time we stir the pot, General." With a single nod, they began their work. By the end of the week, rumors would spread like wildfire, a secret alliance between the royal family's enemies and whispers of the true power lurking beneath the kingdom's fragile peace. One evening, Celine was invited to the royal court for a grand gala. Adrian, eager to impress the nobles and show off his new queen, had no idea that the woman he once betrayed was now plotting his downfall. As the music played and laughter filled the grand ballroom, Celine stepped into the center of the room, drawing the eyes of every nobleman and noblewoman. She was breathtaking, unlike the woman they all remembered. Gone was the shy, naive orphan. Before them stood a woman who had mastered the art of subtlety and power. Her eyes gleamed like sharp diamonds, and her lips curled into a smile that promised a hidden agenda. "Your Highness, it's a lovely evening. But I wonder, do the nobles really know what kind of king you will be?" Adrian looked startled. His smile faltered slightly as he tried to mask his discomfort. "I am destined to rule. No one dares question that." Celine tilted her head, her gaze shifting to Leora standing just a few paces away, the woman who had once been her closest friend. "And yet, you allow your enemies to sit so close. Perhaps that is your greatest weakness, Adrian. You trust the wrong people." Leora's face darkened, but she masked it with a tight smile. She had never been one to hide her jealousy or her desire to maintain power. The look she shot Celine was venomous, a warning. The night wasn't over. Celine had one more card to play. After her conversation with Adrian, she excused herself and slipped into the dark corridors of the palace. There, she met with Lord Cassius, an influential nobleman who had long opposed Adrian's rule. "I know you've longed for a kingdom led by wisdom, not ego. Help me, and we will reshape this world." A king doesn't need a crown to rule. He only needs the loyalty of his people. Lord Cassius nodded, his eyes gleaming with interest. "You've always had a fire, Celine. I never expected you to rise again. I'll back you, but you must promise me one thing." Celine leaned in, intrigued. "Anything." "That the throne shall be mine once Adrian is out of the way." Celine smiled. Power was slipping into her hands, but she wasn't about to give up everything to a man who only cared for himself. "Of course, Cassius. But first, we must make Adrian believe he is untouchable. Then we will destroy him." It wasn't long before Adrian began to sense the shift. The court had always been filled with whispers, but now they seemed louder, pointed, directed toward him. His once unshakable confidence started to erode piece by piece with every passing day. He found himself staring into the abyss of his own mistakes. Something is wrong. Why are they all looking at me like that? It's as if they know. Leora, ever the calm strategist, tried to reassure him, but there was a trace of unease in her voice. "Don't be ridiculous. They're just envious of your position. You are the future king, Adrian. Let them talk." But Adrian's eyes didn't leave Celine across the room, where she conversed with Lord Cassius and a handful of powerful nobles. There was something about her calm composure that unsettled him. No, she can't be this clever. She should have broken by now. Leora was growing more suspicious by the day. Adrian's obsession with Celine was starting to affect their plans. She'd been by his side for years, but now she felt the sting of a looming threat. Celine had returned from the dead, but it wasn't for redemption. It was for revenge and power. Leora had seen the look in Celine's eyes at the banquet. She wasn't just a woman scorned. She was a force of nature, a woman who would stop at nothing to see Adrian kneel. In the royal chambers, Leora stared into the mirror, brushing her dark hair with trembling hands. Her reflection stared back at her, the flicker of doubt flashing in her gaze. "I've been with him for so long, but if she takes everything, what will be left for me?" Leora's heart raced, not with love, but with fear. Fear that Celine would succeed, and she would be left with nothing. Celine knew Adrian was watching her. She could feel his gaze burn into her every move. But she no longer cared about his attention. His mind, once sharp and calculating, was now clouded with paranoia, and that made him vulnerable. The court, sensing Adrian's unease, began to tilt in Celine's favor. Her subtle moves were paying off. She had planted seeds of distrust between the nobles and Adrian, and now it was time to watch the chaos unfold. But there was more to this game. Much more. In the dead of night, Celine met with General Valen and Lord Cassius in the war room. The candlelight flickered, casting long shadows on the maps that were spread out on the table. Adrian thinks I'm just a woman who is scorned. But I'm more than that. This kingdom will be mine, and I will take it without mercy." Lord Cassius nodded eagerly, his eyes glinting with ambition. "You'll have the throne, Selene. I'll make sure of it. But we must strike quickly. The longer we wait, the more powerful Adrian becomes." General Valen stood, a map of the kingdom in front of him. The key is to make Adrian believe he's lost control without actually confronting him directly. We make him doubt every alliance, every decision. We need to weaken him from within. Selene smiled, her eyes cold with resolve. "He will burn, not by my hand, but by his own making. And when it's done, I'll be the one left standing." While Adrian spiraled into paranoia, Leora's jealousy and fear boiled over. She was no longer the confidant she once was. As the nobles turned their gaze towards Selene, Leora realized she had to act fast, before the court completely abandoned her and Adrian. Late one evening, Leora snuck into the royal vault where Adrian's crown was kept. Her fingers trembled as she took the ornate golden crown into her hands. She had always known that Adrian was not a king by merit, but by birthright. And now she would make sure he never ruled again. But as her fingers brushed over the cool metal, she hesitated. If Selene gets her hands on this throne, I'll be nothing. I'll be her servant. The one who betrayed her for power. With a sharp intake of breath, Leora coated the crown in a fine powder, poison meant to leave its victim incapacitated for days. It was subtle, effective. By the time Adrian placed the crown on his head for his coronation, the poison would take its toll. As she replaced the crown back into the vault, her eyes narrowed with dark resolve. It's either him or me. The day of Adrian's coronation arrived. The air was thick with anticipation. Nobles filled the grand hall, awaiting the moment when Adrian would ascend to the throne and formally claim his birthright. But Selene wasn't concerned with his ceremony. She wasn't there to watch him crown himself as king. No, she was there to observe the cracks in his facade. Every move, every breath he took, she could sense his weakening resolve. She caught Leora's eye across the room, and for a brief moment, they shared a look that spoke volumes. Leora knew that Selene was watching, and Selene knew that Leora was desperate. The game had changed. But the real test would come when the crown was placed on Adrian's head. The crown is not just a symbol of power. It's the key to his downfall. The ceremony was grand, yet something felt off. The nobles whispered among themselves as the crown was slowly lowered onto Adrian's head. But it was not the weight of the crown that unsettled him. It was the overwhelming dizziness, the creeping numbness in his limbs. His vision blurred. What? What is happening? The crowd murmured, confused. A hush fell over the hall as Adrian staggered, his knees buckling beneath him. His face went pale, and his lips trembled as he reached out for the royal scepter to steady himself. But it was too late. His body felt like it was turning to stone. Your Highness, are you well? The crown on Adrian's head seemed to burn, the poison seeping into his blood, leaving him weak and shaking. He couldn't understand. He had always been in control. Always. But now he was losing it all. No, it's too soon. Selene watched from the shadows, a small, satisfied smile tugging at her lips. She had seen this coming. The crown he had always coveted was now the instrument of his downfall. The poison is working, but it's only the beginning. Soon, the throne will be mine. As Adrian collapsed to the floor, the room was thrown into chaos. The nobles scrambled to his side, but it was clear he was no longer the invincible prince they had once worshipped. The very symbol of his power was turning against him. Leora stood frozen, caught between the realization that her plan was unraveling and the hope that she might still regain control. But the nobles weren't watching her anymore. Their eyes were on Selene. The crown weighs heavy on its bearer, does it not? Too heavy for a man who's built his rule on lies. Her words cut through the chaos, and all eyes turned toward her. The smirk on her face was not one of arrogance, but of deep satisfaction. Revenge had tasted sweet, but power tasted even sweeter. If the crown chooses its rightful heir, then it has already chosen. Adrian Vale was never meant to wear it. Not now, and not ever. Adrian struggled to rise, but his vision continued to fade, and his limbs were no longer obedient. His voice barely came out as a whisper. You did this. Leora. Leora stepped forward, her eyes filled with doubt, but also desperation. The nobles were starting to murmur, sensing the shift in power. No, you couldn't. I did what you wanted. I gave you the throne. But Celine only laughed softly, the sound chilling. Leora was just another pawn in her game. You think I want your scraps, Leora? The throne will never be yours. It was never meant for you. You were always just the shadow behind Adrian, the one who believed you could control him. Leora's hands trembled as she realized the truth. She had been played. First by Adrian and now by Celine. As Adrian's condition worsened, General Valen moved quickly. His loyalty to Celine had never wavered, but he knew the court would soon be divided. Those who had sided with Adrian would need to be dealt with. We must move swiftly. If he dies here, the nobles will fight for the throne. You need to solidify your claim before someone else takes advantage. Celine nodded, her eyes cold and calculating. Prepare the guards. We'll hold the palace until we have secured the support of the nobles. I won't leave this room until Adrian is no longer a threat. General Valen turned to leave, but before he could exit, a soft voice interrupted. Is the prince truly finished? It was Lord Cassius, standing near the door, his face filled with an odd mixture of curiosity and something darker, perhaps regret. You've won, but at what cost? Adrian is but a symptom of the disease. His downfall is inevitable, but do you think the court will accept your rule, or will they tear you apart the way they tore him? Celine fixed him with a sharp, unwavering gaze. She was not worried about the court's acceptance. She had prepared for this. I don't need their acceptance. I only need their loyalty and the throne. The hours passed, and Adrian's life hung by a thread. The royal physicians worked frantically, but the poison was too potent. His mind, once sharp and calculating, was now clouded, his future slipping through his fingers. But just as Celine had orchestrated the fall of Adrian, she knew it wasn't enough to simply watch him falter. She had to ensure no one would stand in her way once he was gone. It's time. Send a message to the nobles. Let them know Adrian is incapable of ruling, and that the crown has found its rightful heir. The royal hall was dimly lit, with the distant sound of the physician's frantic movements in the background. Adrian lay on a grand marble table, his once youthful face now drained of color, his eyes dull with fever. He barely recognized the world around him. The poison had done its job. Celine, you. Celine watched from the far side of the room, her gaze cold and emotionless. She had no mercy for the man who had killed her once. No pity for the prince who had so easily thrown her life away. You never learned to respect me, Adrian. You thought I was weak. That I was always the storm you couldn't predict. Adrian's lips trembled as he tried to speak, but his voice faltered, weak from the poison coursing through him. Why didn't you just stay dead? Because I have something you never will, revenge. And a crown that you will never wear. His eyes fluttered shut as he finally succumbed to the poison. Adrian Vale, the crown prince, the man who betrayed her, was dead. His reign had lasted mere moments, and his downfall had been as swift as it was brutal. The room was still. Celine didn't feel triumph. She didn't feel joy. All she felt was the bitter taste of justice. He was gone, but the game wasn't over yet. As news of Adrian's collapse spread like wildfire throughout the kingdom, Celine's enemies began to reveal themselves, whispers in the dark corridors of the palace, servants running to their masters with reports of his condition. But there was one truth everyone knew. Celine was now in control. Leora, now isolated, stood in the palace gardens. Her eyes darted around, watching the soldiers move in formation, preparing for whatever Celine had planned. The once powerful woman, who had once stood beside Adrian, now found herself in the same position as everyone else. She was expendable. What have I done? Adrian is dead. And now Celine. She will take everything from me. Her hands clenched into fists, frustration and fear gnawing at her. Celine had won. But there was one more thing to be done. Leora needed to secure her own place in the new world that was about to be born, before it was too late. Back in the royal halls, Celine stood before the council of nobles. They had gathered at her command, each of them looking uncertain, unsure of what to expect. The throne had already been vacated. Adrian was dead. But who would rise to fill the void? Celine was a woman reborn with a singular purpose. She was not a puppet, nor was she a mere consort. She was a queen in the making, and every noble present knew it. They had seen her power growing, her alliances strengthening. Now they had no choice but to bow before her. She stood tall, her voice unwavering as she addressed them all. The time has come for us to face the truth. Adrian's reign was a failure. His bloodline ends here. I will rule this kingdom, not for revenge, but for the future. For a kingdom built on strength, loyalty, and wisdom. The room fell silent. The nobles exchanged looks, whispering amongst themselves. They had longed for stability, but now they were forced to choose. Celine was not just the woman who had once been scorned. She was the future. A murmur rippled through the court, and then Lord Cassius spoke, stepping forward with a deep bow. Your Majesty, your claim to the throne is undeniable. We stand with you. The other nobles followed suit, one by one, pledging their allegiance to her. They were not foolish. They could see the power in her, the drive that had brought her this far. But as they swore their loyalty, Leora entered the hall, her face twisted in a mixture of fear and resolve. She had no choice but to act now. If she didn't, she would be left with nothing. Celine, you may have won this battle. But remember, you are not untouchable. You are still a woman. And I have more influence in this court than you realize. The court froze, unsure of what Leora was doing. Celine's gaze flicked to her, a slight smirk playing at the corner of her lips. Do you think you can threaten me, Leora? You've already lost everything. But Leora wasn't done. She had one final weapon left. Perhaps not. But you may not have noticed, Celine, that there are still those in this kingdom who remember your past. Those who would never accept a woman like you on the throne. At that, a shadow moved in the corner of the room. A figure masked stepped forward, a man who had been waiting for this moment. The masked figure removed his hood, revealing a face Celine knew all too well. It was one of Adrian's most loyal advisors, a man who had been loyal to him and to Leora. Your Majesty, you may have played the game well, but you forgot one thing. You underestimated the lengths we're willing to go to in order to protect what's ours. Celine's eyes narrowed, her mind racing. Was this a challenge? Another enemy trying to take her down before she could solidify her claim? And who, pray tell, are we? The ghosts of Adrian's failures? No. We are the ones who will take back what's rightfully ours. And you'll be left with nothing but ashes. The tension in the royal hall was palpable. Celine stood unmoving, her gaze sharp as the masked man stepped further into the light. Leora's grin widened, but Celine could see the hesitation in her eyes. Something about this wasn't as clear-cut as Leora wanted it to be. You thought I would crumble under pressure, didn't you? But here I stand. Queen, unchallenged, until now. The masked man chuckled, his voice smooth but laced with malice. You miscalculate, Your Majesty. You may think you've won, but a throne built on revenge is a fragile thing. A kingdom full of enemies is a kingdom on the edge of collapse. Celine remained silent, her mind spinning. The masked man spoke as though he were speaking from experience. Who are you to speak to me like that? The masked man stepped forward, his presence intimidating. He raised his hand to remove his mask, revealing the face of an older man, a man who had been a trusted advisor to the late Adrian. His features were sharp, his eyes cold with a lifetime of ambition. I am Lord Garin, former advisor to Prince Adrian, loyal to his bloodline, and now, the one who will see you undone. Celine felt the sting of his words, but she didn't flinch. She had fought too hard to let someone like him, someone connected to her past failures, hold any power over her. Lord Garin, your prince is dead. Your bloodline is finished. You have no claim here, and neither does Leora. Leora stepped forward, her face drawn tight with fury. You speak too boldly, Celine. You have no idea the forces you are toying with. We have friends in the court. You may have gained the throne, but I promise you, it won't last. But even as Leora spoke, Celine could sense the crack in her confidence. Leora was no longer in control. Her desperation was clear, and it would be her downfall. As Lord Garin and Leora continued their threats, Celine's thoughts were racing. She had anticipated some resistance, but this was something different. Lord Garin's alliance with Leora made it clear that there were still forces at play she hadn't accounted for. They were not working alone. But Celine was never one to show weakness. She had learned from her past life that only the boldest survived, and now she was prepared to act decisively. General Valen, bring the guards. At her command, General Valen stepped forward, his loyal soldiers moving into position around the room. They were ready to take action, no questions asked. Anyone who supports this rebellion will be dealt with swiftly. You have two choices: stand with me or fall with those who have already fallen. The nobles shifted uncomfortably, and the room was filled with murmurs. It was clear that some of them were not as loyal as they claimed. Some of them feared Lord Garin and Leora's network of supporters within the court. But the nobles knew power when they saw it. They had seen Celine rise from nothing, and they knew she was not a woman to be trifled with. One by one, they stepped forward to pledge their loyalty. But Celine had more to do than just secure her position. She knew the only way to truly win was to destroy the last of the threat completely. And there was a way to do that, using Leora's own weaknesses against her. I warned you, Leora. You thought you could manipulate me again, didn't you? But you didn't count on my foresight. Leora's expression faltered, but she quickly recovered, her eyes cold. You're just like Adrian, power-hungry and blind. You think you can control everything, but you can't. There are things you don't know, things you can't see. Celine took a step forward, her eyes narrowing with disdain. Leora was bluffing. The real game had always been about control, and Celine had already outplayed her. You forget, Leora. I don't need to control everything. Just enough to make sure you and your allies fall. With a subtle motion, Celine nodded toward one of her most trusted advisors, Lady Varel, who had been quietly observing from the back. Lady Varel stepped forward, holding a letter sealed with a red wax emblem, the emblem of a powerful noble family that had been conspicuously absent from the palace for days. Celine knew that if anyone could sway the remaining hesitant nobles, it was this family. They had their own aspirations for the throne, but they had no loyalty to Leora or Lord Garin. Their loyalty could be bought. This letter speaks of the true traitor among us. Someone who has been playing both sides. The ones who will betray you all when they see fit. You all know who this person is. The room went deathly silent as every noble in the room turned to Leora, their faces pale with fear. Leora's bluff was exposed, and her allies were now questioning her loyalty. Celine's move had been calculated. The letter wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration of Leora's treachery. One by one, the noble families began to pull their support from Leora and Lord Garin, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. With Leora's power crumbling, Celine's eyes returned to Lord Garin, who stood in silence, watching the spectacle unfold. Now, Lord Garin, I believe you owe me an explanation. You wanted to challenge me, but I've already won. Lord Garin's expression darkened, but there was a flicker of fear in his eyes. He had underestimated Celine's ability to manipulate the court, to bend them to her will without lifting a finger. You will regret this, Celine. You don't know the forces you've just made enemies of. Perhaps. But I know one thing for sure, Garin, you won't be around long enough to see it. With a single nod from Celine, General Valen signaled for the guards to escort Lord Garin and Leora out of the palace. Their rebellion had failed. And with them, the last remnants of Adrian's power were torn from the kingdom. The palace was quiet once more, the chaos of the last few days fading into a tense, fragile silence. Celine had triumphed, but she knew the battle was not over. She had rid herself of Lord Garin and Leora, but their rebellion was only one thorn in her side. The crown she now wore was no more secure than it had been moments ago. I've played the pieces well, but the game isn't finished yet. There are still those who would take everything I've earned. The weight of the crown on her head felt heavier than it ever had before. Power was fragile, easily lost. She could feel the eyes of the nobles upon her, each watching her every move, waiting for her to falter. The kingdom was at a crossroads. The court had largely pledged their loyalty to her, but there were whispers, some quiet, some louder than others, that questioned her right to the throne. After all, she was a woman, and power held by a woman was often a power that was easily challenged. Celine's thoughts turned to the next steps. She needed to act swiftly. Securing her position wasn't just a matter of defeating enemies. It was about solidifying the trust of the people. If she couldn't win their hearts, her reign would always be at risk. Outside the palace, as Celine contemplated her future, a new threat was already in motion. Far from the royal halls, a clandestine meeting took place in the shadow of the kingdom's borders. In a dimly lit room, Lord Thorn, a once prominent noble who had been exiled under Adrian's reign, paced restlessly as he spoke to his conspirators. Celine thinks she has won. But she has forgotten that power can only be taken, never given. Her victory is temporary. One of his followers, a silent figure cloaked in shadows, nodded, awaiting his command. We'll take back what's ours. The kingdom belongs to those with true blood, not some woman who thinks she can rule by vengeance. It's time for a new king to rise. Lord Thorn's eyes glinted with ambition. He had always seen himself as a ruler, a man of destiny. Adrian had been a weak leader, and Celine was nothing more than a product of tragedy, a figurehead, a pawn who had won through force, not merit. We will gather the loyalists. Those who are loyal to Adrian, who despise what she's become. And we will take the throne. By any means necessary. Back at the palace, Celine was unaware of the growing storm brewing beyond the city walls. But she was not blind to the subtle signs of discontent that lingered in the air. The nobles were restless. Some whispered to each other in corners, while others kept their opinions quiet, afraid to speak against the queen openly. Celine's most trusted ally, General Vallon, approached her in the early morning hours. His face was grim as he informed her of disturbing reports from the outer provinces. There are rumors spreading, Your Majesty. Some are calling you a tyrant, others a puppet. They say the throne was never meant for you. Celine's gaze hardened, her expression becoming steely with resolve. She had expected this. She had known from the beginning that her rise would not be without its challenges. But she was no stranger to overcoming obstacles. Rumors are nothing but whispers in the wind. The question is, how many are willing to act on them? General Vallon nodded, understanding her meaning. The whispers weren't just idle gossip. There were those with enough power and ambition to try and usurp her rule. But Celine had prepared for this, and she had a plan. I'll meet their challenge head-on. Let them come. This time, they will learn that taking what is mine is not so easy. Later that evening, just as the moonlight bathed the palace in its cold glow, a familiar figure appeared at Celine's door. It was Lord Cassius, his face set in a tight expression of urgency. There's someone you need to meet. Someone from your past. Celine raised an eyebrow. She had expected more trouble from the nobles, but this was something else. Who are they? Lord Cassius motioned for her to follow, leading her down the dimly lit corridors of the palace. They arrived at a private chamber, and as the door opened, a tall figure emerged from the shadows, a woman, dressed in elegant but somber attire, her eyes sharp and knowing. You. I thought you were dead. The woman smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had seen too much, someone who had lived through the same betrayals that Celine had. I should have died, yes. But I survived. And now, it's time for you to know the truth about everything. Celine's mind raced. This woman, who was she? What truth could she possibly have that Celine had not already discovered? She had spent her past life uncovering the lies of those around her. But this woman had secrets, and secrets could be deadly. What truth? Speak quickly. The woman stepped forward, her eyes piercing into Celine's very soul. You think your greatest enemies are the ones who challenge you openly. But the real threat is much closer than you think. There are forces at work that you cannot see, old forces. The bloodlines of this kingdom run deeper than you realize, and the one who gave you your crown might not be the one you think. As the woman's cryptic words sank into Celine's mind, she understood one thing. Her battle was only just beginning. There were deeper layers to the court's conspiracies, secrets hidden beneath the surface that even she had yet to uncover. Lord Thorn's rebellion was just the tip of the iceberg. But Celine was no fool. She had been betrayed once, and she wouldn't let it happen again. Now it was time to dig deeper, to uncover the hidden players who were pulling the strings from the shadows. I will take what is mine, and no one will stand in my way. Celine stood before the woman who had claimed to know the truth about her bloodline, her rise to power, and the forces that had shaped her fate. The mysterious woman's words echoed in Celine's mind, each syllable a reminder that everything she thought she knew could be a lie. What do you mean? The one who gave me my crown might not be the one I think. Who are you talking about? The woman's gaze darkened as she stepped closer, her voice lowering to a whisper. There are ancient powers in this kingdom, Celine. Old bloodlines that were buried with the fall of your family. But they still remain, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Your family's fall was orchestrated, and your rise was not as unexpected as you believe. Celine's mind reeled. What did this woman know? Her family's fall, the events that had led to her tragic death in her past life, had been a mystery. Had someone set her up all along? Who are you, really? The woman's eyes softened, but there was a coldness to her smile, one that spoke of deep wisdom and untold hardship. I am the last of the old blood, a survivor of the same fall you faced. I was supposed to be dead, just like you. But I survived. I've learned to navigate the dangerous waters of this kingdom, and I've been watching you, Celine. A cold shiver ran down Celine's spine. She had thought herself the one in control, the one manipulating the pieces. But this woman, this unknown survivor, knew far more than she had let on. So, what do you want from me? Why are you here? The woman stepped back slightly, eyes narrowing with a mix of understanding and wariness. I'm here because there's a storm coming. The old families, the ones who are truly tied to this land's fate, they are still pulling the strings. They were behind your family's downfall, behind the rise of Adrian. And now they have returned. They will try to take what you've earned. They've always believed that power belongs to them, and they won't stop until they see you fail. The weight of her words settled over Celine like a heavy fog. She had thought she was fighting to reclaim a throne that was rightfully hers. But now she wondered, was it ever truly hers to begin with? As Celine grappled with the woman's revelations, the court continued to stir with rumors and whispers. Lord Thorne's rebellion, though crushed, had not died completely. Those loyal to him had gone underground, waiting for an opportunity to strike. And now, Celine could feel the tension in the air. The nobles, ever calculating, watched her every move. Some had pledged their loyalty, but there were still factions within the court who had their own ambitions that no longer revolved around Adrian's bloodline, but their own desires. Celine knew the game had changed. And to win, she needed to outplay her enemies on every front. Later that evening, Celine called a meeting with Lord Cassius and General Valen in the palace's war room. They had been her closest allies, but even they were beginning to question the growing instability. The whispers of rebellion, the factions, and the unknown threats all made the kingdom's future uncertain. The old bloodlines are rising again. We can no longer afford to stay on the defensive. We must find out who is pulling the strings from behind the scenes and eliminate them before they can act. We've already begun tracking the movement of Lord Thorne's men. But if this is more than just him, it's a larger network than we expected. Do you believe the woman is telling the truth? Could there really be hidden families that control everything? Celine's gaze hardened. She didn't have all the answers, but the pieces were starting to fall into place. If this was true, the entire kingdom was a game of chess, and she had been a pawn without realizing it. I don't know. But I won't wait to find out. We move forward. No one else controls this kingdom but me. And I'll tear apart every false lie, every hidden enemy, until nothing remains. Her words were fierce, the cold edge of determination clear in her voice. The battle was just beginning. As Celine's plans unfolded, she received an unexpected visitor, one of the most powerful and elusive figures in the kingdom, Lady Isolde, a noblewoman who controlled vast lands and wealth. Her influence in the court was unmatched, and her word was law among the kingdom's elite. Celine had heard of her before, but the woman had never shown interest in the crown. But now, Lady Isolde had come to speak with her. Queen Celine, we've yet to speak privately, but I've been watching your rise. I must say, I'm impressed. Few have managed to achieve what you have, especially considering the unfortunate circumstances surrounding your family's fall. Celine narrowed her eyes. Lady Isolde's compliments were never innocent. She was known for her cleverness, and her alliances were always strategic. I don't have time for idle flattery, Lady Isolde. What is it that you want? Lady Isolde's smile didn't falter, but her tone shifted to something more serious. I want to offer you a proposition. You see, while you may have control of the throne now, there are many who will never accept you as queen. They will fight, and in the end, you may lose everything. But if you accept my offer, I can ensure your position remains unchallenged. For a price. And what would this price be? Lady Isolde's eyes gleamed with ambition as she leaned closer. The throne is yours, but I would like a place at your side. A position of influence, one that ensures my family's continued power. With my support, you can solidify your reign, and we will be unstoppable. Refuse, and you may find yourself at war with those you least expect. The woman's offer was tempting, but Celine knew better than to make deals with snakes. Lady Isolde was not a friend, she was a player, and Celine was still unsure of her true intentions. I don't make deals out of desperation. You will have your answer soon, but until then, I suggest you watch carefully. I will not be manipulated. Celine turned away from Lady Isolde, her thoughts racing. She knew she couldn't trust her completely. Yet, the prospect of an alliance with someone as powerful as Isolde was alluring. The storm was brewing, old bloodlines were rising, hidden enemies were gathering, and loyalties were shifting. Celine had to act quickly to secure her throne before the kingdom she had fought so hard to claim slipped from her grasp. The game was far from over, and she would play it to the bitter end. The days following Lady Isolde's offer were filled with tension and uncertainty. Celine knew the stakes were higher than ever. With Lord Thorne's rebellion crushed, the court seemed to settle back into its uneasy peace. But beneath the surface, danger lurked. Every movement, every word was watched, and alliances were being tested. Celine sat in her private chambers, her gaze fixed on the map of the kingdom that lay sprawled before her. Lady Isolde's offer had been tempting, but Celine was no fool. She knew that power came at a price, and the price of Isolde's support might be more than she was willing to pay. She wants power. She always does. But can I afford to ignore her? If I reject her, I risk making an enemy of the most powerful woman in the kingdom. There was a knock at the door, and General Vallon entered, his face grim. He had been her most loyal ally, but even he was beginning to show signs of wear. The pressure was building, and it wasn't just from outside threats. There were cracks forming within the court that needed to be dealt with quickly. Your Majesty, there are rumors spreading. Some of the nobles are beginning to question your ability to maintain control. They're whispering that the crown was never meant for a woman. Celine's grip tightened on the edge of the table, but she said nothing. She had anticipated this. The moment she had taken the throne, she knew there would be those who would challenge her simply for the fact that she was a woman. Let them whisper. But let them know this, the crown is mine, and no one will take it from me. You must be careful, Your Majesty. Lady Isolde is not the only one you need to worry about. There are factions within the court, old alliances that we don't yet understand. Celine's eyes flicked to the map before her. There were enemies all around, some in the open and others hidden in the shadows. But she wasn't about to let fear dictate her next move. I will play their game. Let them gather their forces. But they will find that I am not so easily toppled. Scene 36. A dangerous proposal. That evening, Lady Isolde came again, uninvited. She entered the royal chambers as though she belonged, her gaze calculating. Celine had already made up her mind about the woman's offer, but she still had a few more questions to ask. You come again, Lady Isolde. What makes you think I would trust you? Lady Isolde smiled, the same confident, cold smile that had always made her a force to be reckoned with in the court. Trust is a rare commodity, Your Majesty. But I offer you something far more valuable, stability. Celine's eyes narrowed. She had no patience for empty promises. But this time, she would let Isolde play her cards. Stability at what cost? What do you truly want, Lady Isolde? Your offer is not without strings. Lady Isolde leaned in slightly, her eyes gleaming with calculated ambition. The price is simple. My family will have a seat at your side. A position that will ensure we are protected from your enemies. The kingdom is rife with betrayal, and you need people you can rely on. People who won't betray you when the time comes. Celine could feel the tension in the air. Isolde's words were a promise, but they carried a hidden threat. If Selene rejected her, the consequences could be dire. But if she accepted, she would be bound to Isolde's will. And what guarantees do I have that your family will remain loyal once I've given you what you want? Lady Isolde's smile remained steady. None, of course. Loyalty is earned, not given. But I have the means to ensure that you are not left vulnerable. If you accept, I will use my influence to secure your reign. You will never be challenged, so long as you remain with me. Selene felt the weight of her words. Her kingdom was on the brink, and Lady Isolde's proposal was tempting. But what would she be giving up? As Selene pondered her next move, an unexpected disruption shook the royal palace. The city gates were closed. There was a commotion outside, and soon, a messenger arrived with urgent news. Your Majesty, there are reports of a rebel force gathering near the eastern borders. They are led by a man who claims to be a rightful heir to the throne. He calls himself Prince Kellen, and he says he is the true blood of your family. Selene froze. Prince Kellen, another royal? A potential rival? She had never heard the name before, but now there were rumors of his existence, and his claim to the throne could tear everything apart. A prince who claims to be of my bloodline? And yet I never heard of him. Perhaps the shadows have hidden him. Perhaps there are secrets even you are unaware of. Selene turned to General Valen, who was already preparing to deal with the threat. Send word to my loyal commanders. We will deal with this, Prince Kellen, swiftly. If he dares challenge my bloodline, he will regret it. But even as she spoke the words, a chilling thought crossed her mind. Had she truly uncovered all the secrets surrounding her family's past? Or had someone, perhaps even Lady Isolde, been hiding the truth from her all along? The next morning, Selene stood at the palace balcony, gazing out over the kingdom she had worked so hard to claim. The rebels, led by this mysterious Prince Kellen, were marching toward the capital, and she had no choice but to meet them head-on. We have enough forces to crush them, Your Majesty. But there's something troubling. These rebels, why have they waited until now to strike? Selene's mind raced. She could sense that there was more at play here. Prince Kellen wasn't just a random rebel leader. He had been hiding in the shadows, biding his time. There is more to this than meets the eye. Someone is manipulating these events. The question is, who? As the army prepared for battle, Selene knew one thing for sure. This rebellion was just the beginning. There were enemies hiding everywhere, and not all of them were as easy to see as Prince Kellen. It was time to get to the bottom of the mystery. As Selene watched the distant horizon, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Prince Kellen, a name she had never heard before. And yet, now he was leading a rebellion at the very gates of her kingdom. His claim to be of royal blood had rattled her, but the question lingered. If he truly was from her bloodline, why hadn't she heard of him? General Valen's voice broke her thoughts, but his words only deepened the storm of confusion. We've sent scouts to gather information on Prince Kellen. His forces are numerous, and they seem to be moving with an unusual level of coordination. There's something more behind this rebellion. Selene's eyes narrowed. She had prepared for every possible challenge, but this was something entirely new. How could I have missed this? A prince in hiding with a claim to my bloodline. Why would no one tell me? Turning back to Valen, she spoke with authority, masking the uncertainty she was starting to feel. We will meet them head-on. Prepare our forces. We'll march toward the eastern borders and face this rebellion with the full force of the crown. But I want every spy we have sent to uncover the truth about this Kellen. Who is he really? The sun was setting as Selene and her army approached the rebel camp. Her thoughts churned with suspicion and doubt. Prince Kellen, though a newcomer to her knowledge, seemed to know more than he was letting on. The rebellion had come too swiftly, too precisely. This wasn't a random uprising, it was a carefully orchestrated move. As they drew closer to the camp, Selene's scouts returned with new intelligence. Kellen was not only royal, but his lineage was tied to a long-forgotten branch of the royal family, one that had been considered lost for generations. The scouts spoke of Kellen's appearance, tall, with dark eyes and the same sharp features as her late father. The resemblance was unmistakable. Prince Kellen was no stranger. He was the son of her uncle, a sibling to her father, exiled long ago by her family's enemies, lost to history. My uncle's son. I should have known. All these years. Her father's sibling, the man who had been stripped of his rights and left to fade into the shadows, had a son. A son who had returned to claim what was his by blood. As night fell, Celine's forces reached the heart of the rebel camp. The air was thick with tension, and the campfires flickered as she and her generals approached the central tent. Prince Kellen stood waiting for her, his posture straight and regal, despite the ragtag army surrounding him. He was younger than Celine had imagined, but the resemblance to her father was undeniable. Prince Kellen was a living link to the past, a past that Celine had thought buried forever. So, the queen herself comes to meet me. I've heard much about you, Celine. And I see now that the rumors were true. The crown really did fall to the most unlikely of us all. Celine's gaze hardened as she met his eyes. She could feel the weight of his claim, a legitimate claim to the throne. He was her cousin, and yet, her enemy. A man who had been forced into hiding, only to return with an army to take what he believed was rightfully his. You have no right to the throne. You were exiled. Your bloodline was erased for a reason. Kellen's expression didn't falter. He was unshaken, his voice steady and filled with conviction. My bloodline was erased by traitors who fear the true power of my family. Your family's legacy is built on lies, Celine. You wear a crown that was never meant for you, and you do so at the expense of everything our bloodline once stood for. Celine took a step forward, her eyes sharp with both curiosity and the cold bite of duty. She was not a woman to back down easily. But the reality of Kellen's words cut deep. If his claims were true, everything she had fought for, the very foundation of her rule, was in jeopardy. Your bloodline was erased to protect the kingdom from your uncle's treachery. You have no claim here, Kellen. Kellen took a step closer, and for the first time, his voice softened, almost as if he were trying to reason with her. I don't want your throne, Celine. I want the truth. Your father's reign was built on the blood of those he betrayed. You sit on a throne that was never meant for you, and deep down you know it. The words stung more than Celine expected, but she refused to let her emotions show. This wasn't just about her family's history anymore. It was about power and the throne that was rightfully hers. Enough. Your rebellion ends here, Kellen. There is no place for you in this kingdom. She motioned to General Valen, who signaled for the soldiers to ready their weapons. The battle was about to begin. The air crackled with tension as Celine's forces and Kellen's rebels faced off. The clash of swords and the cries of battle filled the air as the two armies collided. But as Celine fought alongside her men, her mind raced. This battle was about more than a fight for the throne. It was a fight for the truth. Kellen's forces were fierce, well-trained, and determined. But Celine's resolve was unwavering. She had taken this kingdom with blood and sweat, and she would not let a ghost from her family's past take it from her now. As she fought through the chaos, she caught sight of Kellen once more. He was at the center of his army, a formidable figure, directing his forces with ease. But in his eyes, Celine saw something that made her pause, the same fire she had once seen in her father's eyes. What if he's right? What if everything I've believed is a lie? But she could not afford to doubt now. Not when her kingdom was at stake. The clash of steel and the cries of battle echoed across the eastern fields, the scent of blood mixing with the damp air. Celine's heart pounded in her chest, each strike of her sword echoing her determination. Her forces were locked in a fierce struggle against Kellen's rebels. But as she fought, her thoughts remained on the battle that wasn't just happening on the field, it was happening within her heart and mind. Kellen's words continued to reverberate in her thoughts. Your family's legacy is built on lies, Celine. Had she truly taken the throne under false pretenses? Was the foundation of her rule really that fragile? But she had no time for these doubts now. Her soldiers were relying on her to lead them. She couldn't afford to question herself in the middle of a battle. Kellen's forces were determined, but they lacked the cohesion and discipline of Celine's well-trained army. Her forces were winning. Slowly but surely, Kellen's men began to falter. Celine saw an opening and moved quickly. She cut through the chaos toward Kellen, who was at the center of his men, directing his soldiers with fierce intensity. He noticed her immediately, his eyes locking onto hers. Celine, this is your kingdom. But is it really yours? How long can you keep it when the truth of your family's betrayal comes to light? Celine gritted her teeth, her gaze never leaving his. His words stung more than she cared to admit, but there was no turning back now. I'll fight for this throne, for my father's mistakes, for my own bloodline. I'll fight until there's nothing left to take. With a quick motion, she surged forward, clashing with Kellen's guards. The fight between them was inevitable. The air around them crackled with tension. This was no longer about mere power, it was about family, legacy, and what it meant to be the rightful ruler. Kellen's sword met hers with a metallic clash, and the force behind his strikes was undeniable. They circled each other, both knowing that only one of them could walk away from this alive. You fight well, but you know this isn't just about skill, Celine. This is about blood. And yours is a lie. Celine's grip on her sword tightened. She didn't answer, there was no time for words. They fought, blow after blow, the sound of their weapons ringing through the air like a symphony of war. But something changed in the midst of their combat. The intensity of the fight sparked something deeper inside her. Kellen wasn't just fighting for his life. He was fighting for something more, something that could destroy everything she had fought for. In the chaos of the battle, Celine's mind raced. Kellen's words had struck a chord. Could it be true? Was her family's legacy really founded on betrayal? Had her father's rule truly been built on lies? And if so, what did that mean for her? The bloodline that she thought was the foundation of her rule was now in question. As their swords clashed again, Celine's thoughts flitted back to her father's reign. The stories she had been told, the promises of unity and strength, had they all been a facade? The betrayal Kellen spoke of was a truth that Celine had to confront, but not now. Not in the midst of battle. Her determination resurfaced. She would not lose to Kellen. He might have a bloodline, but she had earned her crown. She had fought for it, and she would hold on to it no matter the cost. With a quick series of strikes, Celine managed to disarm Kellen. His sword clattered to the ground, and he fell to his knees, breathing heavily, staring up at her. For a moment, there was silence, then he spoke, his voice low, but filled with defiance. You may win today, Celine, but the truth will always remain. You are not the true heir to this throne. Celine's heart pounded, but she stood tall. She was the queen now, and she would ensure her reign was unchallenged, no matter the truth of her bloodline. I am the queen, and I've earned every inch of this throne. Your rebellion ends here, Kellen. There is no place for you in this kingdom. With a swift motion, she ordered her soldiers to take Kellen into custody. His rebellion had failed. This battle was over. As the dust settled, Celine surveyed the battlefield. Kellen's forces had been defeated, but the victory felt hollow. She had won the fight, but the war for her throne, the battle to claim her place in the kingdom, was far from over. Her soldiers cheered, but Celine felt an uneasy silence settle over her. She had defeated Kellen, but his words continued to haunt her. Was her family's bloodline really built on lies? If Kellen was truly of her blood, what did that mean for her right to the throne? As her thoughts spiraled, she was approached by Lady Isolde, her expression unreadable. The older woman had watched the battle from a distance, her sharp gaze never leaving the unfolding events. It seems the rebellion has been quelled, Your Majesty. But the true challenge remains. Celine turned to face her, her thoughts momentarily distracted from the aftermath of the battle. What do you mean, Lady Isolde? You won today, but your reign is still fragile. There are forces far older than you realize, Celine. And Kellen is just the beginning. Celine's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Lady Isolde had always been one to speak in riddles, and Celine had learned to take her words with a grain of salt. But there was truth in what she said. The rebellion had ended for now, but Celine knew that the real challenge to her reign had just begun. Later that evening, as Celine stood on the balcony of her palace, looking out over the kingdom she had fought so hard to claim, the weight of her decisions pressed heavily on her shoulders. She had won the battle, but she had lost something far more important. Her bloodline, her legacy, had been called into question. The very foundation of her rule was now shaky, and the whispers in the court had only grown louder. What am I truly fighting for? Is it power? Or the truth? As the moonlight bathed the kingdom below her, she knew one thing for sure. This war was far from over. and she would not rest until she had secured her place, no matter what it cost. The following days passed in a blur. The victory over Prince Kellen had brought peace to the kingdom, at least for the time being. But Celine couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at her. Kellen's rebellion had been crushed, but his claim to the throne lingered like a shadow, threatening to undermine everything she had fought for. The bloodline he claimed was hers, too. Her thoughts turned over and over on the same question. Who was she really? Her father had been a great king, but had his reign truly been as righteous as she had been taught to believe? The bloodline Kellen spoke of, the one he claimed, had been hidden, lost, until now. Celine stood before a large mirror in her chambers, the weight of her crown heavy on her brow. Her reflection stared back at her, but it felt different now. The crown she had fought for, the throne she had claimed, seemed somehow less certain in the face of the revelations about her family's past. Is this what I'm meant to be? A queen, but not truly of the bloodline, I thought. As her fingers brushed against the cold metal of her crown, a sharp knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. General Valen entered, his face grim but with urgency in his eyes. Your Majesty, there's news from the capital. Someone has come forward claiming to have knowledge about your true heritage. Celine's heart skipped a beat. The truth of her bloodline was a secret she had thought buried forever. Who could this person be? Bring them to me. Now. Scene 48, the strangers claimed the chamber door opened once more, and a man entered, a stranger who looked both weary and confident. His clothes were plain but well kept, and his eyes held a sharpness that immediately put Celine on edge. Your Majesty, I come with the truth about your family's legacy. Celine narrowed her eyes, her instincts telling her to be cautious. The man was no ordinary messenger. He had information, dangerous information, that could change everything. You claim to know the truth? Speak quickly. The man straightened, his eyes not leaving hers. I know of your family's fall, Your Majesty. I know of the betrayal, and I know why your uncle was exiled. I am the son of the man who betrayed your family, a man who saw the throne rightfully belonged to your uncle and believed that the true bloodline was not what your father claimed. The words hit Celine like a blow. Betrayal, bloodlines, and hidden truths, the web of lies around her family was growing thicker by the minute. This stranger was claiming to be tied to the very heart of the betrayal that had shaped her entire life. Who are you? And why should I believe you? The stranger took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. I am the son of Leontius, your uncle's brother. Your father's betrayal was not an isolated act. He erased the bloodline that would have threatened his reign, and he did so by any means necessary. Your uncle was killed, but not for the reasons you were told. The throne belongs to the family of Leontius. You are not the rightful heir. Your uncle's bloodline was always meant to rule. Celine's blood ran cold. Her father had killed her uncle, the man who had once been seen as the true heir to the throne. She had been raised to believe that her father's actions had been for the kingdom's greater good. But now the truth was far darker than she could have imagined. No, it can't be true. My father would never. Your father was a king who feared his own blood. He erased everything that might have threatened his rule, including the legacy of your uncle. You were made queen, but it was not destiny, it was manipulation. Your father set everything in motion long before you were born. Celine's mind reeled as the weight of his words sunk in. Her entire life, everything she had fought for, was based on a lie. Her father had murdered his own brother and erased a bloodline that was just as legitimate as hers. Why are you telling me this? What do you want from me? The stranger's eyes softened with a mixture of pity and something more calculating. I want you to understand the truth. There is no throne for you unless you claim it with blood. The rebellion, Kellen, and others like him, they're not just threats to your rule. They are the legacy your father destroyed, and now that legacy is coming for what is rightfully theirs. You are caught in a battle between bloodlines, Celine. And sooner or later, you will have to choose. The stranger's words left Celine reeling. Her world, once defined by the strength of her father's rule, now seemed like a fragile house of cards. The rebellion, Kellen's claim, and the shadow of her uncle's bloodline, everything was entangled in a web of lies. She stared out of the window, watching the kingdom stretch before her, its future uncertain. What am I fighting for? Is this crown truly mine to keep? Can I even trust my own bloodline? Or am I just another pawn in a much larger game? Her thoughts were interrupted by General Valen's voice, his presence behind her sudden and steady. Your Majesty, the court is restless. Many are questioning the legitimacy of your reign. There are whispers that you are not the true heir, that your throne was built on deceit. Kellen's defeat has not silenced them, it has only emboldened them. Selene turned, her face set in grim determination. Let them whisper. Let them question. This kingdom will bend to my will, or it will be crushed beneath it. She knew now that the battle was far from over. Her father's legacy, her uncle's death, and the bloodline that had been erased, they were all part of a game that Selene was just beginning to understand. And no matter what, she would win. Selene's mind raced as the weight of the stranger's words settled over her. The revelation about her bloodline, about her father's betrayal and the existence of her uncle's rightful claim to the throne, felt like a storm that had torn through the foundation of everything she had built. Was her rule nothing more than a consequence of her father's actions? The morning after the stranger's visit, Selene gathered her most trusted advisors, General Valen, Lord Cassius, and Lady Varel, in the royal war room. She could feel the air thick with the tension of uncertainty. The court was whispering. They were no longer just questioning her claim to the throne, they were questioning her very legitimacy as queen. The whispers in the court grow louder, and the rebellion is not over. Prince Kellen was only the beginning. If my bloodline is truly in question, we must act swiftly before my enemies gain more ground. General Valen stood tall, his gaze never wavering from her. He had always been the rock she relied on, but even now, she could see the subtle shift in his expression. He, too, was troubled by the growing unrest. Your Majesty, your claim to the throne is valid, but the court needs to see your strength. They will not follow a queen who is seen as an imposter. If we do not take immediate action, we risk losing everything. I know that, Valen, but I will not be bullied into action. This kingdom is mine, and I will fight for it. I will show them that I am more than just a woman on a throne. I am the queen of this land. Lady Varel, who had been silent until now, spoke up, her voice calm yet filled with wisdom. There is truth in what General Valen says. The court will not be moved by words alone. We need to show them something more, an act of power, something that will reinforce your rule. Selene turned to her, considering her words carefully. She had trusted Lady Varel for years, but now, with so much at stake, every suggestion, every plan had to be weighed carefully. And what do you suggest? We already defeated Kellen's rebellion, but that has not silenced the questions. The people and the court, they want to see that I am the rightful queen. They need proof that I am strong enough to lead. There was a brief silence as Lady Varel stepped closer to the table, her eyes glinting with resolve. Perhaps it is time we deal with those who doubt you directly. We need to remind them of the power you hold. As Selene's plan to assert her power began to take shape, she found herself forced into an unlikely alliance. News had come that Lord Thorn, who had previously led the rebellion, was not as defeated as he appeared. He had gone into hiding, amassing support from those who believed in the old bloodlines. If Kellen had been a thorn in her side, Lord Thorn was a serpent waiting to strike. Lord Thorn is not finished. We cannot underestimate him. His loyalty is to the bloodline that he believes is rightfully his. If I am to hold this throne, I must strike first. What are your orders, Your Majesty? The answer was clear. She needed to eliminate the threat before it could grow any stronger. And that meant acting with precision. But there was one other option Selene had been reluctant to consider. Lady Isolde, with her immense power, could be a powerful ally in this fight. I will meet with Lady Isolde. If she's truly as loyal as she claims, then now is the time to prove it. We will need her influence to secure the court. Her support could be the key to uniting the kingdom behind my rule. The thought of trusting Lady Isolde made Selene uneasy, but she knew she had no other choice. She had to secure her position now, before her enemies were allowed to regroup. Selene summoned Lady Isolde to the royal palace. The meeting was set to take place in a quiet room, far from the eyes and ears of the court. As Isolde entered, Selene saw the sharpness in her eyes, the calculating gaze of a woman who had lived for power and influence. Lady Isolde, I need your support. The court is divided, and there are those who still believe in the old bloodlines. We cannot afford any more hesitation. Will you stand with me, or will you allow this kingdom to fall apart? Isolde took her time, studying Celine with a cool, appraising look. She had always been someone who tested her alliances, and this was no different. But she also knew that Celine had been a force to reckon with. I have always known your claim to the throne was tenuous, Celine. But what you ask now requires more than mere loyalty. It requires something far more dangerous. The old bloodlines are stirring, and if you truly wish to survive, you must be willing to make sacrifices. Celine held her ground. She had no more time for games. I am prepared to do whatever it takes. I am the queen now, and I will not let anyone take that from me. If you have the power to secure this throne, I am willing to work with you, no matter the cost. For a long moment, Isolde said nothing. Then she stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. Then let us make a deal, Your Majesty. You will give me the influence I need, and I will ensure that your rule remains unchallenged. Together, we will eliminate your enemies. Celine didn't hesitate. This was the bargain she had to make. It was the only way to protect her kingdom and her crown. Done. In the weeks that followed, Celine's power began to solidify. Her alliance with Lady Isolde had given her the support she needed in the court, and the nobles who had been hesitant to pledge their loyalty now found themselves falling in line. Those who had once questioned her right to the throne were silenced. But there was always a price. With Isolde's help, Celine had managed to root out those who still clung to the old bloodlines. Lord Thorn and his followers were forced into the shadows, their rebellion scattered, but the remnants of their power remained. The court was still divided. The old families who had supported her father's rule still watched her with suspicion. Prince Kellen, though imprisoned, was still a threat, and the shadow of her father's betrayal hung over her like a dark cloud. But Celine had proven one thing. She was not the weak queen her enemies had hoped her to be. The battle for her throne was far from over. But she was prepared. She would never let anyone take her crown, not now, not ever. Celine sat in her private chambers, looking out over the kingdom she had spent so much time securing. Her eyes, however, were not filled with pride, but uncertainty. Her alliance with Lady Isolde had solidified her power within the court, but the kingdom was still rife with tension. The old bloodlines had been silenced, for now, but the storm was far from over. The whispered rumors that had circulated about her rule, about her father's betrayal, had not gone away. Instead, they had become louder. Some in the court were only waiting for the right moment to strike. As she brooded, Lord Cassius entered, his expression grim. He had been one of her earliest supporters, and his loyalty had never wavered. But the shadows of doubt were growing in the royal palace, and even he seemed uneasy. Your Majesty, word has reached me that there are still those who challenge your rule. They are whispering that your reign is not just a consequence of your father's betrayal, but a product of a larger conspiracy, one that even Lady Isolde might have a hand in. Celine's gaze remained fixed ahead, though her heart quickened. Lady Isolde's power was a double-edged sword. She had helped secure Celine's throne, but Isolde's ambitions were as dangerous as her own. I know the risks, Cassius. But what is the alternative? If I don't wield the power now, I lose everything. The throne, the kingdom, the people who rely on me. Cassius stepped closer, a hint of concern in his eyes. I understand, Your Majesty. But there are whispers that Isolde's influence is too far-reaching. Some say she has been pulling the strings from behind the scenes, even manipulating the court to further her own power. Celine's hands clenched into fists. Lady Isolde's influence was undeniable, but she had been a necessary ally. Without her, Celine's rule might have collapsed. I am aware of Isolde's power, but I can't afford to stand against her just yet. I need her, for now. Cassius seemed to consider her words carefully before speaking again. Then we must act quickly, Your Majesty. We cannot afford to wait for Isolde to become too entrenched in the court. If she is working to consolidate more power, we need to find a way to curb her influence. Celine nodded. She knew the game was not yet won, and every alliance had its price. But with Lady Isolde's hold on the court so strong, Celine was left with little choice but to play the game on her terms, however dangerous it may be. I'll have a plan in place. For now, keep an eye on her. But do not act without my orders. As the days passed, Celine's grip on the throne appeared to be solidifying. The court had fallen largely into line under her rule, and those who had been hesitant now seemed to recognize her power. Her enemies, for now, were silent. But beneath the surface, a new threat was beginning to take shape. Prince Kellen, though imprisoned, had never been one to stay quiet for long. Even after his defeat, whispers from the dungeons reached Celine's ears. There were reports that Kellen had been meeting with certain factions in the court, people still loyal to the old bloodlines. It seemed he wasn't finished yet. Celine's spies brought her news of Kellen's secret supporters, small factions of nobles who had kept their loyalty to the rebellion. They had begun to rally under his banner once again, though he had no true power. I can't let him grow stronger. His rebellion may have been crushed, but his supporters still believe in his cause. She knew that if Kellen was allowed to rally these factions, his challenge would not just be a threat to her throne, it would be a war for the future of the kingdom. And if the kingdom was divided again, it could tear them all apart. She summoned General Valen and Lord Cassius for a private meeting. I want a full investigation into Kellen's contacts. Every person he has spoken to. Find out where his support is coming from and eliminate it. General Valen nodded, his expression unwavering. Of course, Your Majesty. We will move quietly before anyone notices. And if Kellen himself attempts to escape, we will make sure there's no escape for him. Celine's gaze darkened, her resolve growing stronger with each passing moment. Kellen's challenge might have been crushed on the battlefield, but his legacy of rebellion had not died. If he could turn the tides of the court, he would undo everything she had worked for. I will not let this kingdom fall apart. Not again. As plans were set in motion to deal with Kellen's remaining supporters, Lady Isolda's influence in the court continued to grow. The question of loyalty weighed heavily on Celine's mind. Was Isolda truly an ally? Or was she using Celine's power for her own gain? The whispers around the palace began to grow again, more persistent this time. Celine knew that Lady Isolda's ambitions were as dangerous as they were necessary. She had helped solidify Celine's claim to the throne. But now, Celine could not ignore the possibility that Isolda had her own designs on power. But Celine was no fool. She had learned to play the game of politics from the best, and she would not be outmaneuvered. She would control the narrative. She would hold her throne. As the night drew on, Celine found herself alone in her chambers, staring out over the kingdom. The palace that had once been a symbol of strength now felt like a cage that held not just the kingdom, but all her enemies, waiting to strike. She clenched her fists. No one would take her throne. Not Isolda, not Kellen, and not anyone who thought they could challenge her. This kingdom is mine, and I will destroy anyone who tries to take it from me. Days passed in the kingdom, and Celine's grip on the throne grew ever tighter. But the shadow of rebellion continued to loom over her, and every ally she gained was balanced by a growing number of enemies. Kellen's supporters had risen once again, and the whispers from within the palace grew louder. The factions that had once bent the knee to her father's rule now saw her as weak, a usurper, a woman on a throne she was never meant to hold. Kellen, though imprisoned, had managed to stir unrest in the hearts of those who believed in the old bloodlines. And now, Celine knew it was time to end this. She called for one final council, a last gathering of her most trusted allies and enemies alike. The time had come to decide the fate of the kingdom. It was no longer a battle for power. It was a battle for survival. She would either win or lose everything. Celine stood before the gathered nobles and leaders, her posture straight and regal. At her side was Lady Isolda, still a powerful ally, but the tension between them was palpable. Celine had given her everything, but now she knew that Isolda's ambitions were as dangerous as ever. Even as they fought together, Celine kept a careful eye on her. Across the room, Kellen's supporters stood tall, their faces filled with defiance. The man himself was chained to a pillar in the corner, a symbol of everything that had come before, the bloodline that had been hidden, the rebellion that had risen, and the family that had been betrayed. Celine spoke, her voice carrying the weight of the entire kingdom. The time for whispers is over. You will either stand with me or you will fall. This kingdom will not be divided. I will not allow it. Kellen's voice, weak but defiant, came from behind her. You sit on a throne built on lies, Celine. You may call yourself queen, but you will never be my ruler. You will never be the rightful heir. Celine turned toward him, her eyes sharp with determination. I am the queen now, Kellen. Your rebellion is over. And with it, the claim to your bloodline. The truth is irrelevant. The kingdom needs a ruler who will lead, not one who lives in the past. The tension in the room was thick, but Celine stood firm. Her kingdom had already suffered enough. She would end this now, one way or another. The noblemen and women stood in silence, their eyes flicking between Celine, Kellen, and Lady Isolde. They were waiting for one thing, a signal. A move that would determine the future of the kingdom. Celine knew this was the moment. The last stand. Without turning, she addressed Lady Isolde, her voice steady but filled with the weight of command. Lady Isolde, you have served me well, but the time has come for you to choose. Will you stand by me, or will you let your ambition destroy everything we've worked for? Isolde, her expression unreadable, stepped forward. For a moment, Celine thought she had lost her ally. But then, Isolde's lips curved into a smile that was more dangerous than any weapon. I choose power, Celine. And I choose you. She raised her hand, and at once, the guards behind her seized Kellen's supporters. In an instant, the rebellion that had threatened the throne was crushed. Kellen, despite his defiance, had lost. With the rebellion quelled, the nobles who had once questioned her began to shift. Kellen's supporters were silenced, and the remaining opposition bowed to her power. The throne that had once seemed so precarious now seemed as solid as the stone it was built upon. The kingdom was finally hers to rule. But there was something in the air, something Celine could not shake. The weight of her decisions had been costly. Lady Isolde, though loyal, had her own plans. Celine had not fully trusted her, but she had made her choice. Now there was no turning back. Isolde had chosen her place in the court. She had chosen power over loyalty. Celine stood alone on the balcony of the palace, watching the kingdom stretch beneath her. She had won. But at what cost? The crown is mine, but power is never truly free.